Welcome to the Samueletini Show, where business, innovation, and sustainability converge to drive progress. Are you ready to uncover solutions shaping our future? Let's dive in.
Welcome to a new episode. And today we are going to discuss somebody important, the ocean, our origin. And we do it in somebody that has dedicated her life to that, connecting the dots with the many systems there. So I'm very pleased to have here today Antoinette Vermilye. If I pronounce it correctly, she is the co-founder of the Gallifrey Foundation. Antoinette, it's such a pleasure having you today at the show.
Thank you, Samuel. And it is an absolute pleasure to be here and to be talking to you. Thank you for having me on the show.
Antoinette, your story, you're a thought leader, just a Google research, you have done hundreds of work, hundreds of talks. But before that, before going into the depth of why and the passion that you have for the ocean and the work that you have done there, we want to know a bit more about your story. Have you become a sustainability leader?
It's an interesting one. It was unintentional, but it was driven by the fact that I've always looked at things that are not fair, where there is injustice. And so it has been it started as a kid. I grew up in West Africa, and there I would see fishes that were brought in by the fishermen. And of course they had to, that was their life. They were getting in the fishes, but then they'd discard or throw away these poor gasping fish. And as a young kid, when we are not inured to the emotions of other life just being discarded, it really upset me. And throughout my life, it's always been who doesn't get to speak, who's not speaking for them, where's the injustice? And then it evolved into noticing patterns and how systems fail. How do those people or those creatures get ignored? And of course, as you start circling into it, you start going back to where is the biggest problem? It's where people don't see it, and that is the ocean. And so whether it's climate or plastics, overfishing, finance, power, it's all out there. And no one really seems to know because they don't see it. And so that was how my work actually evolved into, how can I solve this or try to? And then it's systems change. It was actually going much, much deeper into that ocean of problems and realizing you have to go really deep to work out what are the things that could create systems change that were positive and for good. And that can happen from anywhere. It can happen from within the ocean, or it can happen in a completely different area.
I really like also the perspective that you put. Everything is connected, everything is together. No, we can frame it that the ocean as being, the cradle. I'm sitting on the cradle of mankind, who is marketed, the Rift Valley. So we can say the ocean is the cradle of all humanity because we have come from there, and it's such an important way. So how do you see this everything connected? How do you see the different systems going together, and how also we can make people understand that?
Okay, that's a really good and a very important key question, because it's exactly how we work. So when I started, like many of us do, we're on a journey. And my original journey was, okay, there are plastics in the ocean. That's where we said, okay, we're going to start on that. And originally it was, oh my God, there's so much plastic in the ocean. How can we stop it? And then we realized that this was affecting fishes and all the marine ecosystems. But then my journey was, well, fish don't vote. So policymakers don't really care because their vote doesn't matter. And then it was like, okay, let me see if I can frame it differently. So then we started talking about food security, in the fact that most of the marine extraction that we're doing right now is contaminated with chemicals and toxics and microplastics. And I thought that would work. And unfortunately, I was sorely disappointed. So then it was like, okay, we've got to realize that I've been working at this in a silo system. I'm just going through it at one lens. What about that we look at health risks, climate exposure, markets, reputation? How about risk? Where are the opportunities as well? Let's turn it to the positive. And so what we start to do is look at every connected angle, because that's the point that we don't realize. So for instance, if I go to a supermarket and I buy salmon, okay, I may say, oh, I can't have wild salmon because that's bad for the ocean. But if I have farm salmon, That's also bad. So how do we now start looking at what are the systems that can, and remember, I am half activist, half science, half policy, half campaigner. So it's diplomacy. So sometimes it is, how can we help these businesses be better, be more accountable, be more transparent? And what are the levers that will keep them being all of that? And that's where you need government regulation to come in, because you create a level playing field. So this is a big thing for business, because if I'm a business leader and I want to do the right thing, sometimes it can put me at a competitive disadvantage. But if the policy is saying everyone has to do this, then it becomes a fairer system. And unfortunately, in the geopolitical world that we're living right now, that's quite a big ask, but we don't stop.
That is our responsibility, because we have still only one planet, despite the idea of going to others. So we will, for the foreseeable future, we will remain on planet Earth. So it's very important. And you have mentioned many of the, let's say, different streams of war, the plastics. We will talk about the shark fins, since I've also seen that, and others. But, and I think the umbrella, I mean, if you want to discuss it in this way, is the Gallifrey Foundation. So I would like to ask you how you have framed, and if you can explain for the people that are not familiar with it, how do you work? Because, in some places I've seen Winterfield actually coalition bidding model, how these things work in practice.
So that was an interesting one. And I'm going to say this about most people. When we start out doing things, when you start out your business, when you start out what you're doing, we don't really know what we're doing. We have an idea, unless you're a scientist or a lawyer, whatever. You're kind of like, you're learning. And with humility, I have to say the things that I knew at the beginning, my views and everything, were probably what most of us hear, and we have a very kind of superficial understanding of events. My job, though, is to go down now into the deeper layers and see what the ramifications of that are. I think I learned quite early on that, I don't know if this expression works in Italian, but the path to hell is paved with good intentions. So there are many things that are being done out there which are meant to be good, but because there's such a narrow focus, we forget all the externalities, the negative externalities that we might be creating. And in those instances, it's our job to have a kind of Hippocratic oath to make sure that as we're going along, we do no harm. And so what is Gallifrey? Gallifrey is essentially, we exist not to have a return on investment or give money in the hopes that we want to make impact and we want to see impact. But we're not going to just say, over to you. We're going to support those groups. We're going to build relationships with them. We're going to work in collaboration. We're going to see how we can help. All of us are going to work together to a common goal. And that common goal might be, in some cases, asking activists to not be so noisy about something, because there might be diplomatic moves behind the scenes that might, or will say, okay, that didn't work, go do your thing. Or we might bring in scientists to support our data, of which, by the way, I'm going to just say, there is more than enough data that exists to tell you that the state of the oceans is in a very bad way, and that there are very good solutions out there, and we just need to try and make them happen. So I think at the end, what we're trying to do is go beyond impact, beyond just a single project or a single lens. So that's sort of our goal. And it sounds very general, but if you apply that to everything you do, and everyone laughs at me because my first question in anything is, what can go wrong? And we need to keep asking that self on the way, what can go wrong, or what is going wrong for the environment, for social injustice, for human health or planetary health impacts? Because if we're not monitoring all of those, then one of those are going to go along and become a negative externality. So that's the aim of trying not just to help us, but to help other groups that we're working with to keep doing something that keeps creating a positive feedback loop.
Say a more holistic perspective that's really encompasses the usual silos, no? Or many, let's say, philanthropic or other foundation that is just we concentrate on this, on rhinos, on elephants, on, I don't know. But let's say you look at a more broader, because we know the interconnectedness of all, the different dimensions, from the social to it's like more or less when you do social work and development work, you start maybe pointing out an environment, and you start understanding, there is also socio-economic, there is also health. There is also, I mean, if the women who walk 50 or 20 kilometers per day getting firewood, I mean, there's no point talking about rights. Let's fix the clean cooking, and then we talk about rights. So I don't know if I've tried to
You're
simplify.
describing it perfectly, because what you're showing are the examples exactly of trying to solve one problem, but you actually realize that you open a can of worms, because it's a lot of problems. And the big mistake that we all make, and it's something that we try as well, because we realized we were doing it. Do you know the game whack-a-mole? So you hit something and you push it down, but the moment you do that, another little mole pops up. And you're trying to do all of them. So this is where you have to think, we don't just keep concentrating it. We have to look at the whole thing, that we get a whole load of hands that all push down at the same time. And that's where you're lining everyone up in the sink. There's a fantastic scene in the movie Finding Nemo. I think it's that where all the fishes are being caught, and he's got his dad caught in it, and they're all being pulled up. And then he says, start swimming down, swim down, all of you together in the same thing. So what seems impossible can be possible when we're all streamlined in the same direction.
I mean, I recall it. It's a fantastic scene also, that one. It really shows because of the power of storytelling. Sometimes I even use because it's very good to tell people how to behave, and the power of collaboration. And many of the initiatives have been really, you have made the impossible possible. I want to pick some example, and then you can pick also other. I mean, one is how you have worked with the fly without fins, and the importance about the shark. So I recall myself being on the border between Guinea-Bissau and Guinea-Conakry, and having, on a fishery project, I mean, more than 20 years ago, and discussing with people, the influx, especially North Korean or Chinese, just cutting the fins of the shark and taking them, and then release, and then destroying the ecosystem. So you have managed the impossible really to stop that. So, and it's a show also now, a small thing. You have also put together the work of pulling together conservation, public pressure, and helping, what you said before, helping business doing better. How did you work? How did you manage to do that? Because it's not easy, for a campaign really to push businesses, change behavior.
Thank you. They're very kind. I would like to say that this is a very collective effort. And I just let's go back to shark finning. To be absolutely clear, so shark fins, there was a huge campaign in 2013 in China to stop shark fin soup. And the government basically said, we will not have shark fin soup at any official banquet. That was in 2013. And from that, 80% drop in shark fin soup sales in China. China is not the biggest market. However, Hong Kong is the biggest importer of shark fins. It trades. So there's a big market all around China, which is far more important. The other thing is, it is not just China and Taiwan. Spain is one of the biggest exporters of shark fins, and they get them from South America. And Ecuador is one of the biggest providers. So everyone, again, it's connected. It's not one baddie or one villain. There's a whole system that is working. So what did we do when we were looking at the shark fin? There's a lot that's being done. The problem is at the moment that sharks are not protected enough, that we cannot protect them from this shark fin trade. There is, in the EU, a citizens' initiative that was accepted and discussed about 3 years ago to ban the shark fin trade. It's still in discussion, which is 3 years too late in my view. The UK have banned import-export of all shark fins. The US have also done the same. But the point about this is, we realized, how can we get you and I in the street? You hear about shark fin soup. You're not going to buy shark fin soup. I'm not going to buy shark fin soup. But how can I do more? So then we said, okay, well, the biggest thing is, of course, where's the trade happening? It's happening on the high seas. And you can't, if I talk about a boat or a ship, people won't do it. But airlines who have fins on their wings, little finlets, we said, and this was during COVID, why not ask them to stop carrying shark fins as cargo? And we did a campaign to either shame or thank the airline for either carrying or not carrying fins as cargo. As a result of that, we've got about 60 airlines to agree not to carry fins as cargo. We're still working on others. There've been big campaigns. However, like everything, things change. But we got the One World Alliance, all of their airlines to agree not to carry fins as cargo. But let's be clear, sharks are not, it's not just about fins anymore. It's about their liver oil for squalene, which is in cosmetics and pharmaceuticals. It's also the meat, which is now a byproduct of finning. And these are things that we have to keep addressing, because sharks are not like other fishes. They don't reproduce at the rate, they reproduce very slowly, sometimes 2 or 3 pups or eggs, but there's not a lot. So they are a diminishing species, a species that have existed for 450 million years on this planet. And yet we are in the process of literally destroying them. So I work with a group of about 60, 70 groups from around the world. And between us all, we share our campaigns. We create social media campaigns. We get intel on the policies. So it's very much this interconnectedness that continues to this day to keep trying to keep sharks or make sharks more protected than they are. Unfortunately, they are literally that big loophole in everything to do with the ocean that we're trying to close. And the problem is we're trying to close it as their populations are being diminished. I mean, it's 73,000 sharks killed a day.
That's big, and then it's also something that destroys also a repercussion on the chains, and then other species, and then it creates
Ecosystems.
ecosystem and imbalances. And it's really I was in a conference, and all these trades and all this distraction that we make. I will discuss about even eels and how the trade of eels is destroying a complete ecosystem, especially in southern Indian Ocean, off the coast of Mozambique, Madagascar. So it's really how destructive behavior we bring there. And on talking about the destructive behavior, I think as you started, I think everybody when thinks about ocean thinks about the plastics, the big the size of Texas that is in the middle of the Pacific, and we'll all have done our bit, doing some beach cleanups, and you end up the day with maybe 5 bags of trash. So plastic pollution, it's not it's an encompassing, now it's become a global health also issue. So which are the intervention? How, from an activist point of view, that somebody is also in diplomacy, how we can really have some positive action in that and solving this problem?
So we've been involved in plastics for now 10 years and helped the input into the IUCN report on microplastics in the ocean. I've learned that plastics is not just an environmental problem, it is a human health future problem, it's an economic problem, and it is a total social injustice problem. We are also involved in the Global Plastics Treaty negotiations, and it is very sad that a few countries who stand to benefit in the short are going to keep pushing and for a more selfish and delaying tactic so they can continue to increase plastic production. Now, we have to be very clear. There is a necessity for some plastics, okay? But they're not single-use plastics. They're not unnecessary plastics. They're not the stupid little trinkets that we get. They're not sachets. There are so many solutions that do exist. So you're asking me what would change that? And it's back to what I said earlier. First of all, you need a level playing field, which would mean a global treaty where everyone agrees to focus on the upstream production first and foremost. Secondly, you need manufacturers and brands to only produce what they have to produce and not stupid. I mean, how many times do you get a packet of some product because it's 3 for 1? It's wrapped in plastic. Or do you buy a packet of biscuits and it's wrapped in plastic, which is then wrapped in another packet and then and it's like, how much? And now let me take you back to the bigger picture that people aren't talking about. All those plastics have chemicals and additives to make them soft, hard, flexible. Those are chemicals that interfere with our very finely calibrated hormone system. And they are shown to have impacts on our health, our fertility, on cancers, on neurodegenerative diseases or conditions. So the point is, we are actually poisoning ourselves. Now, I'm making this very anthropocentric, but this is also happening out to all the creatures, not just in the ocean, but in the environment as well. So the point is, we need regulation that limits, that puts a cap on plastic production. We then need less fossil fuel subsidies, which are to the tune of 7 trillion. So just in case people don't know, plastics come from fossil fuels. So 98% of all plastics are fossil fuel derived. So we need to reduce that. The next thing we need to do is make sure that the chemicals and plasticizers that we are adding are innocuous, that they do not harm us. At the moment, that is not the case, and there are 16,000 chemicals out there that are added, of which only 1% is regulated globally for health. So this is a huge, huge problem. So it's the health impacts, then our waste. What happens to the waste? All of that is, we are talking about landfill, not very good. We're talking about incineration or waste to energy. But what people forget with waste to energy is when you burn plastics, 20% of that burn remains in toxic sludge. So for every 5 burns, you have that same amount, but 100 times more toxic. What are you going to do with that? Where does that go? No one talks about that. They think, oh, we've just done some wonderful things. The next thing is, the solutions that are coming up are still not yet proven to be non-damaging for health, environment, and social justice, because of course, where are waste incineration plants put? Usually in the lowest, poorest areas, minorities, whatever. So I think this is a much bigger issue, but it starts with government regulation. It starts with accountability, transparency, monitoring. And without those things, and penalties, because that is the big issue of everything that we're talking about today. You've talked about sharks, we've talked about plastics, we were talking about other things. All of these are issues that are the small symptoms of bad governance processes that are lacking monitoring, transparency, accountability, and penalties. And if I had a penalty, if I knew if I did something wrong, my factory would be shut like that, I can assure you my standards would be much stricter and I would adhere to those regulations.
And that is exactly what sometimes, what is missing. Because, of course, if there is no penalty, if there is no an incentive, or if we frame it in another way, to not do that behavior, of course, it's easy to jump in that part. And I wanted to ask you, a question that sometimes we had, a bit provocative question. There is a lot of discussions about the role of finance, as the top-notch solution for every single environmental problem. And we had guests in favor of this carbon, guests that have some critics. So we want to understand, since you are, let's say, the advocate of the ocean, so how do you see about this blue carbon and ocean finance that is now in vogue and seems to get traction? Is it a real solution, protects ecosystem, or it is something that is really just another capitalist solution just to finance, but without little or no impact?
It's a difficult question to answer because there are two sides. So I think if I step back, the intention is noble. Because what is the problem? The problem is the countries that need the money in order to do the things that they can do Okay, so if I have no money, I'm going to go out, I'm going to cut down every tree. I'm going to fish till the bottom of till there's nothing left. We're going to do those things because that's survival. However, in the global north, we're all fine fishing, cutting, benefiting from all of this. So the aim was to transfer money so that those projects could help protect the things that we need to give. In a way, it was to give nature a value to pay it for its services. But in that process of trying to transfer money from the global north to perhaps the global south, or the projects that needed it, there've been some corruption on the way. So having said that, in the bigger picture, I believe that we have to, it's kind of one of those things that you have to keep trying and improving because the idea is noble. The problem is that in this process, and in fact, funnily enough, that led to an organization that we created called Fair Carbon, because we wanted to offset, for our travel, which we have to do, we wanted to offset it in blue carbon projects. But actually, when we started looking into this in, like 2019, 2020, there were only 7 viable blue carbon projects that really worked. So then we went, well, what's wrong with this picture? So then we did an analysis of all the gaps along the way and what was going wrong. And then we said, okay, we've got a template of how this could possibly be fixed. And it's a systemic approach. It's like, is community buy-in? It's no good telling people you must do this, or moving people out of forests because we're going to use that for carbon credits. I mean, you've got to work with community because they are the stewards. You then have to know, do they have land tenure? Because if they don't, anything they do is going to someone else. So they're not working to get. Then you have to know, are the conditions correct? So, for example, people planting trees or mangroves in the wrong place, taking a photo op and going away is not solving the problem. Then you also have to know is if I'm planting mangroves, but upstream there's a sugar factory or an iron ore refinery and the river is coming down with its silt, that's going to destroy it. And then you have to get to the other point when the actual mangrove project or seagrass or whatever is viable, it's working. Then you have to start selling that for the credits. Now, the credits don't have to necessarily be a big evil company. It could be philanthropic. It can be all sorts of different reasons why people would want to protect. The point is that there is this, like a U valley, where people, the projects, the mangrove projects have got to a point where they're trying to prove their viability, but they have to be bought, their carbon credits. At that moment, they're vulnerable because they're running out of the first stage of donation philanthropic money, and they're trying to bring this in to start bringing in the credits. And that's when they're vulnerable. And that's where the carbon cowboys come in. And that's where you've heard about all of this abuse. So the key is, okay, fix that. And so that is slowly now in the process of being fixed with more transparent standards. In a way, again, it's like a renaissance. It started out with a good idea. Lots of people came in. Some people went, oh, I can game the system. I can get the best out of it. And it's not necessarily to the benefit of the people who are doing the most work. So I actually do believe in carbon credits, provided they are done in a fair way that ensure the people who are doing most of the work, it's that the money is front-ended to them, not to the people at the other end who end up making a lot more money out of it. If you are there, and anyone who works in finance, if you're getting more money than the project, then there's something wrong with your model. And that's a question people need to ask themselves. So I think in the end, these are long-term projects and they are not extractive shortcuts. That's what we're trying to assure. So yes, I do believe in it. I also do believe that in the finance system itself, right now, is probably one of our biggest problems on the planet, because the shareholder value has meant that anything that would be for the good of environment, anything good for even social justice, or even the population health, is pushed to the side. And we're seeing this today with the EPA being completely gutted for any regulation for health, for environment. And those are things that people have to live with. If I go out and I'm breathing in toxic mercury, I'm going to suffer. And then I'm not going to have a health system that is going to help me. And then it's going to cost me because I'm going to have to go to the doctor and pay for that. If my food is laced with chemicals, I'm going to get sick, or my children are going to get sick, or their children are going to get sick. And they may be lifelong problems. And all of this keeps going to serve the wrong, it's a crazy backward market that only serves a few. And that's what we are trying to do, is to move to impact accounting that doesn't just cover your financial balance sheet, but your environmental balance sheet, your health, social, and human health impact. So I think those are the things that we have to be. This is a more global. It's ESG, but even better. Again, a system that worked and failed and now should be improved upon.
And Antoinette, thank you so much for this explanation. As I always say, thinking binary, yes or no, wonderful, but sometimes reality is more nuanced, as we can say. And of course, the idea is noble, is good, but of course there is some correctiveness. Otherwise, as you say, it can be predated by the ultra capitalistic or turbo capitalistic logic. And on that, because you said it many times, regulation, the diplomacy side, the activist side is what really also can make the change, because of course it's important. The activism is important. There may be the regulations, the discussion, but of course you need somebody that draw a line. And to draw a line, of course, it is also important to participate and be present at this COP or other, initiatives that are really putting those lines for the environment. And for that, I would say you co-founded also the She Changed Climate. We have discussed that with your other co-founder in previous episode, but we really want to know how this initiative, having more women at the top climate negotiation, nature negotiation on the boards can really help, nature and foster what you have really discussed, this system thinking and pushing change towards a better planet.
This was an interesting thing for us, because I grew up thinking feminism, equality, it was there until COP26, when dear Boris Johnson elected an all-male high-level team. And then it was like, hang on, so we're only getting one set of perspectives here. Where is the inclusivity? Now, I'm going to go back to the bigger picture of nature. Nature is biodiversity. If I went into a room and it was just full of, actually in Kenya, really interesting where you are. When I first went there, you go and you go on safari and you see your first zebra and everyone goes, yay, zebra. And then you see another, and then you see another and another and another and another. And by the end of it, you're not looking at the zebras anymore. That's biodiversity when it's just very vanilla. But then, of course, you do know that underneath that, there are all the small creatures, there's the birds, there's this, and you start to look for those. The same thing needs to happen with our thinking. It's inclusive perspectives. And unfortunately, the way that I've actually just talked about this very recently, I realized that young men are brought up with a kind of like a power. We're meant to be the provider, where it's more than protection. It can start to be protecting in a gentle way, or it can be protecting in a macho way. It can be, I deserve the voice because I represent my family. These are the little subtle things, and this is not to criticize. It's just that that's how we've lived with that system. But when you actually look, and what was interesting for me, I've traveled around the world. Different people speak in different ways. They may be slow. They may be much more thoughtful. They may not be so aggressive. They may not be so, maybe I should use the word masculine. And we tend to say, oh, well, they're slow. They're not speaking like we speak. But what they say is probably so important. And that was the opening point of any decision that we make about our future needs to involve all stakeholders, of which the biggest global minority, in inverted commas, is women, because actually we're part of the global majority of the planet. But think about it. People who have different perspectives will make our decision making probably more difficult and slow, but at the end, the outcome is more robust. At the moment, and more than ever, we have this being demonstrated in the US, how vanilla, in every sense of the word, every decision that is being made for the planet, for the people, for everyone, it is only self-serving the small minority who are in power and pushing everyone else out of power. That basically means other perspectives, which are so important, are being overlooked. So our aim of She Changes Climate was, yes, it's women, but we are the tip of the arrow. It's everyone behind us. And we will always talk about women first, but it is not exclusive to women because the problems are the same. And we've got countless reports of how science is very male dominated. And therefore a perspective that doesn't bring in those other elements, which are probably more feminine, I should say, or more thoughtful, or more long-termism, or maybe even touching into the emotional impact, because we know that in health, the emotional impact of people can actually affect their health. So these are the things, that was the source of it all. Why are women important? Because at the moment, if I look around on the planet, we're again being suppressed and silenced, but it is not, that is representative of a far bigger problem. So we do need more. We do need a variety of people and perspectives at any table, and they all need to be heard.
And this is very important because to create solutions that are really inclusive and getting the buy-in is also important to put together everybody around the table. It's like in our example, the cooperation project, if you just push the vision because you have some activities to do, you might go fast, but the sustainability and the buy-in and what the ownership, this big English word, is never there. And so you create white elephants. So those are the things that are really important, not to put. And from your perspective, I want to ask this because one of the things that since my father was alive in the 70s discussing the limit to the art, I mean, notwithstanding the critics to that report, but of course we know that has been the foundation, and many others, to the movement and everything. So we know scientific evidence. You say we have tons and tons and tons. I think I would really stop. I mean, research, because we know we want to go for implementation, because every time we need another research, like, for God's sake, I think we understand that. So from your perspective as an activist, as a diplomat, as somebody, so are you optimistic that really the future of the planet, the future of the ocean, can we get out of this research loop and then delivering solutions?
I suppose I'm conditionally optimistic. And what is the condition? The condition is that we know what needs to change. And we also have the tools. And one of the things we haven't discussed at the moment is the legal governance of the ocean, the UN Convention of the Law of the Sea, which, if it had been applied way back when it was passed, as it was intended, we wouldn't have these problems. So we know, it's back to what I was saying: regulation, governance, accountability, monitoring, transparency, and penalties. And so for me, that is the area where I feel is the greatest hope. And I think we've also seen with certain marine protected areas that when you leave them alone, life starts to flourish. So why are we so foolish about this? Why do we keep going and doing? It's literally, what did Einstein say? The definition of madness is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. That's what we're doing. And so the point is, if we can allow the ocean to bounce back, and it will take time. And the sad part is that every year that we don't, every year that we allow more pollution in, more chemicals, more heat energy, more shipping, all of these things that we're doing, we're going to hurt it more. And that's actually delaying our turning point for it to come back. But there are pockets, and I have a lot of optimism. And the other thing I will say that gives me real optimism is the community that I work with. Because someone said to me the other day, don't you get depressed? And I said, yeah, you would get depressed because you just read the news. I'm down there. I know the people who are doing stuff. I know what they're achieving. No one's talking about the wins. We're usually talking about all the terrible things. And yes, it is terrible. But you have to know that out there are people who are dedicating their lives to making the ocean and the world a better place. And they're more than you than you think. And so to me, that gives me the hope when we converge science, activism, and, system savvy leadership. I mean, those are things that to me are a new way forward, or at least a hopeful way, a way I see hope and a way I see change can happen. So yes, conditionally optimistic.
And that is why we are here. Otherwise, we will never be. So we have to push every day, every tree we plant, every farmer that is happy, every woman that now has a clean solution, or a work that is actually a win for the planet, a win for the community. Of course, does not make the headlines like others, but of course is there.
There's a movie, Everything Everywhere All at Once. That's what we do. Everything everywhere all at once. That's what we're all trying to do. Just trying to harmonize it, but that's it. Yes. Sorry.
No, that is exactly the point. And I want to close with some practical, for the people, because you say the regulation that happens at very high level, the politician, the prime minister, the presidents go there. And sometimes, selfish behavior and national interest and things takes advantage and try to the big player work. But for people listening, normal people like me and you, people on the road, so on the street, how we can really do something that is meaningful, as you said at the beginning, what we can do really to change, to make our efforts and our voices are, and to really push change.
This is always it's the $1 million question for everyone. And it's the one I started out. What can I do? I'm just, some mom or whatever. I was working before and I came into this. So I always am very, very share people's feeling of what can I do. But what I also have realized is we all have huge agency. It's the one thing cannot be taken away from any of us, agency. And the agency is with your voice, talking to people, whether it's your friends, your family, your policymaker, voting. So if you vote, and when I say vote, of course, we talk about elections and your regional council. But even if you start writing to your local councillor or in England, your MP or your representative or whatever, you can start giving them you can start asking them questions and they will start noticing what people want. And the final thing is your pocket, where you choose to spend your money and how you choose to spend it. Now, this sounds I'm a plastic-free person, okay? And I often laugh because you try going into shops and it's like everywhere you look, it's plastic. So my joy in this is what's the game I can play to try and find something without plastic? And sometimes my meals are literally based on what was not in plastic, okay? But I don't beat myself up about it when I can't find a solution. I just know next time. Because if we end up making ourselves feel bad about each other, we're not going to get anywhere. This has got to be teamwork. We're all got to do. But the one thing I would ask people to do is choose an option that shifts harm upstream, even if it's less convenient for you. So that's the little pain that we should try and take. Not all of us can do it all the time, but when you can do. And I'm also I appreciate also that I, living in the global north, have a lot more choice and a lot more power. So it doesn't have to be. It can be even in a very simple way. There are different things that you can grow your own vegetables, or you can find from a local farmer. Those are the things that we can do. So everyone, back to the ocean, it's little drops that make an ocean. And every one of us is a little drop.
Thank you, Antoinette, for this. I think really powerful. Everybody has agency, everybody is with the choices. And actually, I think on that, if I can also give my voice, the Global South has a lot to teach to the Global North. For us, recycling, reusing, repurposing, having our own garden has been the backbone, and how people are brought up and people are still doing it mainly, especially now in rural area. Urban area are becoming more westernized. But that is really a powerful lesson. So we really need to be there, and every drop really counts. Antoinette, I really want to thank you so much. A wonderful episode and full of inspiration.
Thank you so much. And I really appreciate you giving me this time for your platform.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Are you satisfied after this wonderful episode? Let's continue together our sustainability journey.